Well, hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining this webinar today. We're super excited. I know we were talking just before we started about the really immense enthusiasm that we've heard kind of feedback on from this topic and our panelists today. So thank you for joining and thank you for that enthusiasm. We're going to go ahead and jump in. But before we introduce ourselves, we wanted to invite you to share your experience through a brief poll. So we have a couple of questions for you popping up on Zoom. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and let us know, where you're joining from, and then would love to hear a little bit more about your experience with cooperative procurement so far. And I will also say, as you're filling in that information, our chat is open. So if you want to share a little bit more details about like who you are, where you're coming from, what you're excited to learn about today, any of your particular challenges that are top of mind, feel free to jump in and add your conversation and your thoughts in that chat. And if you have questions, we will be monitoring those actively during the conversation as well. I know one of the hardest things about these conversations, and with so much expertise around the digital table, is it can be hard to make sure we answer everyone's questions. So our panelists are available as we're going through to kind of answer those questions asynchronously. And then we hope to have some time towards the end of the session to jump in as well. So go ahead if you have things that are top of mind to add them there. All right, great. And I see, wow, we have over 230 people that have answered this question. So a quick look so far, it looks like we have mostly city or county attendance, with K-12 showing up strong as well. Some higher ed, some special districts, some state agencies as well, and some others. And we're going to close this out in just a minute, but looks like in terms of familiarity with cooperative purchasing, seems like folks are kind of rating themselves 3 or 4 most frequently. So knowing enough to maybe be dangerous, have some experience with the benefits, maybe have some experience with the pain or some of the challenges as well, which is great to see. So if you haven't answered that poll, it's really cool to see the responses coming in live, and we'll share the results in just a moment here as well. Okay. I think we can close that out and jump ahead. And we can share those results too, so you all can take a look as well. I kind of voiced them over, but again, city and county attendance showing up strong, with ed kind of right there behind, which is great. And then looks like most of you rated yourself kind of 3 or 4 in terms of your familiarity with cooperative purchasing, which is great. So I'm going to share what we're going to try to cover today in terms of our agenda. At a high level, we'll do welcome and introductions. Then Tyler from GovMovement and I are going to share, just from the kind of platform and cooperative perspective, what are some of the trends that we're seeing in the space that may bring up some of these challenges that our panelists are going to take on and address as well. And then finally, we're going to get into the expertise of our speakers here, and some of their tips, advice, experience, baggage, PTSD, insert your own, synonym for making the most of cooperative purchasing. I guess wisdom is maybe the thing to call it. And again, this conversation will be recorded, so we'll share out a recording at the end. And please do feel free to ask questions as we go along, and not just save them to the end. And we'll try to answer them. Our panelists will try to answer them at least asynchronously as they come up. Okay, so before we dive in, it looks like most of you are somewhat familiar with cooperative procurement and piggybacking, but just as a very quick refresher, as you all know, public agencies are typically required to run competitive processes for purchases above a certain dollar threshold. It was $10,000 for me back in the city and county of San Francisco. I know, talking with Baltimore, it's $5,000, really low for them right now. But a lot of other entities, that's like 50,000, et cetera. So above that threshold, you got to go out to run a competitive solicitation process. And instead of going out to bid every single time, agencies can also leverage contracts that have already been competitively awarded by other public entities as well. So that's what we're mostly talking about, is this practice known as cooperative procurement or piggybacking. and some of its benefits, time savings, reducing the administrative costs or burden, while still meeting compliance requirements. So today's session is all about how to make that process work better for you and your agency. And I'm excited to be co-hosting with Gov Movement. Tyler, do you want to kick us off and say a quick hello and introduce yourself, and then we'll let our panelists
Sure.
introduce.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And what a great opportunity to be in front of all of you today. Tyler McCall, one of the program managers of the Gov Movement program, out of the Atlanta area. I've been in the cooperative purchasing space over 15 years. And I'm really excited today to talk with you a little bit about some of our perspective on the program and some trends that we're seeing in the marketplace that all of our procurement friends deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, now over to our panelists. Can each of you briefly introduce yourselves and share one way that cooperative purchasing has made a meaningful impact on your agency or organization? So we'll kick it over to you, Aaron, to get us started.
Thank you, Mariel. So Aaron Carter, I'm Assistant Vice President, University of Illinois System. Glad to be with everybody today. I think, probably the biggest impact to me, cooperative purchasing, is the groups that I'm typically in with on certain awards or contracts, being able to come together, kind of build that kind of group rapport and develop kind of a stronger block as we go out and try to kind of change the dynamic of cooperative purchasing with some of the awards. So definitely colleagues and now friends in a lot of ways, probably the biggest impact for me.
Awesome. Yeah, being part of that cohort. Awesome. John, over to you.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. If you're on the East Coast like me, John Tiger, I'm the assistant purchasing agent for the city of Virginia Beach. And I would say for me, probably one of the bigger impacts of cooperative procurement, especially over the last couple of years or so for us, we've really tried to get more strategic here at the city on how we work with our end users. And, cooperative procurement and cooperative contracts are a great tool for us to have in our toolkit when we're trying to approach those strategic conversations with our end users. The benefits kind of speak for themselves, but when you sort of lay it out there as another option, like, hey, yes, we could do an RFP or we could do a bid. There's also maybe a couple of cooperative contracts available we could look at. So when you kind of lay it out there as part of your strategic options with your end users, they really appreciate having that option and that choice. So that sort of additional tool in our tool belt has made a big impact over the last couple of years.
Awesome. Stephanie, last but certainly not least.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Brown. I'm the procurement director at Chesterfield County in Virginia. We have responsibility for both the county government and the school system. What I would say, I certainly agree with what both John and Aaron have already said, but we also use it as a tool to mitigate some of our staffing challenges. When we are short resources, we need to react quickly to things. It's one tool that we can use in that toolbox, as John said. It also allows us to leverage the economies of scale at a national level many times than just, the local spend that we have.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm Marielle. I'm a former public servant, founder and CEO here at Pavilion. Started my career in the tech startup space and then moved into government. In that experience, I was both inspired consistently by our shared mission and the spirit of generosity. I think what Aaron shared around kind of being in the same boat and getting to develop those relationships, loved that. But also really frustrated by the tools that were available to me, especially coming from the startup ecosystem. So founded Pavilion to build technology that empowers the public procurement community. I think of it as the kind of products that I wish I had access to as a public servant. And today I'm proud that we serve thousands of public agencies with a free tool that brings together the largest data set of cooperative and piggybackable contracts from across national purchasing co-ops, states, and local sources, all in one place. And I did want to flag, more recently, we've made it even easier not just to find and do your due diligence on contracts from other entities and cooperatives, but also to connect with suppliers and get fast responses too. So our team is available to help identify contracts and suppliers, and then to make sure that the suppliers follow up and respond promptly as well. And then I also wanted to share for the first time kind of publicly ever that we're building something new as well. So as we've built Pavilion, we've heard feedback from procurement teams that we serve that they're increasingly educating end users about cooperative procurement. And I know, John, you're gonna touch on this a little bit later too, of like, how do we kind of improve that relationship? And oftentimes, it can be hard to help end users understand when cooperative procurement is the right purchasing path. So we've actually begun building a new product, still free, that aims to support procurement teams in translating procurement policy off of the page. So getting it out of your purchasing manuals or policy guidance and into a more user-friendly guided experience that's customized for your entity's compliance requirements. And so you can help your end users identify the right procurement path, know the steps that that they need to take in order to purchase. So this is kind of what's in the works. It's a purchasing navigator that puts our contract and supplier database to work for you, making it easy to guide your departments through your entity's policies to the most compliant way to buy. As with everything Pavilion offers, it's free for any public entity. We'll put more info in the chat in case you want to learn more. Just wanted to kind of tease it out there since I'm really excited about it. And it's been built in response to many of your feedback, if those of us joining across the country today. So with that teaser, I want to jump into some of the trends that we're seeing in cooperative purchasing. I'll share some quick data from Pavilion and then turn things over to Tyler from Gov Movement to share more about the trends they're seeing in cooperative purchasing. And then we're going to go ahead and dig in to our panelists' experience. So, I wanted to share a first observation. Number one is that cooperative purchasing is now mainstream. So we collect data from Pavilion's users, and a recent survey showed that cooperative procurement has increasingly become a first stop for many agencies. So more than 2/3 of public entities that we surveyed reported looking for an existing contract to use always or almost always before pursuing another procurement method. So that tool in the tool belt is kind of an increasingly utilized one across public entities throughout the country. Observation number two is that when we talk about cooperative contracts, we're no longer just talking about contracts from national purchasing cooperatives. We're also talking about local and state contracts too. I think many of the folks, including some of our panelists, create contracts that can be shared by other entities. And this chart just shows on Pavilion the number of active cooperative contracts by source. So we have our national co-ops, states, local entities, and other organizations like more regional groups. And as you can see, there's a significant number of views and engagement on local contracts, which tend to cover complementary and different types of categories and suppliers than national purchasing cooperatives as well. So, and then a final observation is just, we now also have a national benchmark for the administrative cost savings of using a co-op contract. So, thanks to NCPP and the RFP tracking project, which collected data from nearly 40 participating entities, we know that it takes on average more than 87 hours to run a new solicitation and upwards of $17,000, sometimes up to more than $80,000 in administrative staff time. So the administrative costs of running a new solicitation, we now have some data around. So again, overall, those are kind of three quick observations from Pavilion. Co-op purchasing is more mainstream. There are more contracts available than ever before, including from your neighbors' filing cabinets. And the benefits of utilizing cooperative purchasing are increasingly quantifiable as well. Tyler, what trends are you seeing from the national purchasing cooperative perspective?
Well, thank you, Marilyn. Great overview. I think some of the information I'm going to share is just going to be very close to what you were talking about from our perspective. I think I would say first is that in the time that I've been in this market, the cooperative purchasing world has dramatically changed, right? And for the better in a lot of ways, right? But what it's also done is it's created some confusion in the procurement profession, right? And so what I'm a big believer in is platforms like Pavilion that are great for cooperative purchasing and for your users to streamline their process. But let's talk a little bit about Gov Movement, right? Because, some of the folks on the call, I've seen people from Kansas to California to Florida that are on here. Some of you may or may not have heard of the Gov Movement program. And so briefly, the Gov Movement program is quite literally a movement to put government first. It's about reestablishing the value in cooperative purchasing. And you can see our mission statement right here. It was founded around one basic principle: to create a true nonprofit public-focused organization that is centered around providing dependable programs and services with the public's interest at the forefront of everything that we do. Our team has a passion for procurement, and we work with public agencies every single week. And so it's a pleasure to bring this program full circle to all of you today. Next slide. So one of the things we get asked most of the time, if not every single day, is why do public agencies use cooperatives? And you can see a few bullet points here. State and local procurement requirements. The good news is that, like Mariel said earlier, cooperative purchasing is alive and well. Throughout the entire country, there are just a few states that actually do have procurement language that makes it somewhat difficult to use cooperative purchasing. But overall, most states do allow for cooperative purchasing usage, right? Federal grant funding requirements. Do these contracts that you're doing your due diligence on have federal grant funding language built into the terms and conditions that allow you to use those funds to use contracts, right? Value and convenience. It's underlined for a reason. Cooperative purchasing was created for value and convenience for both public agencies and suppliers in the process. Contract terms, most of the time, cooperative contracts have extended terms, right? So, anywhere between 4 to 10 years, depending on what the service of the product is. So that can be better for you in your procurement process. Stephanie talked about it earlier with staffing and workload. This is one that we see almost everywhere, right? And so if you have a procurement team and you have a certain amount of time to do the procurement you need to do, but you can use a cooperative contract for certain things you want to buy, then it's a great way to use it. And that's why we're seeing the usage up the way that it is. Ease of access, free registration for most of these programs, no minimum spend requirements, and you can use and access these contracts as soon as you register. And we are going to talk a little bit about local impact, and we get a lot of questions about that, so I'll defer on that one for now. But some cooperatives do allow for local usage and local impact within your particular state or community. Next slide. So just a few market trends, and this is a really interesting one because it does coincide with what Mary was talking about earlier. Overall, the purpose of this is to show you that cooperative purchasing continues to be utilized and it increases every single year, right? So 93% state and local agencies use some sort of alternative method. 70% are planning to increase their usage, and 60% plan to keep their usage. So cooperative purchasing is being used on a day-to-day basis more and more every year. Next slide. So finally, just as I round all this out, our team travels around the country and we do presentations within IGP chapters. And a lot of people ask us about these particular bullet points here, right? And so I'll just hit on a few of them. Is there a cooperative gold standard? Like I talked about earlier, the Pavilion program is fantastic for public procurement and for cooperative purchasing, but not all cooperatives are created equal. And when you do your due diligence and you look at these programs, these are some things to take a look at. What is the structure of the cooperative? Is it a for-profit? Is it a nonprofit? Do they do their own solicitations? Is it an educational system in a state? Do public agencies have oversight directly and involvement on the program? Is there a compliance solicitation process? Is there a true lead agency involved? Award practices. Is it quality over quantity? Is it awarding to everybody or is it awarding to a few? Quality over quantity is a big deal. Transparency and auditability. These programs should be done on a transparent level so that you can feel comfortable using these programs. I'll hit on administrative fees for just a quick moment. 10 years ago, we never used to get questions about this. And quite honestly, public agencies now know that there's some sort of administrative fees attached to these programs. The average in the marketplace is anywhere between 2 and 5%. The government program is a flat 1% for suppliers to help drive additional value for you, the public agency, and for suppliers, but it is something to think about when you're looking at these programs. And then, of course, value. It's a widely used definition of what this should be, but these programs should be designed to drive value to your organization. So hopefully that was helpful, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mariel.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, well, we're going to jump in with our panel who has a lot of experience and wisdom to share today. And again, as a reminder, we do invite you to add your own questions. I've seen some of them pop up in chat. So our team will try to monitor those. But if you have a particular one that you want to elevate as not just a comment, but a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature, and that'll help us panelists kind of keep track of those burning questions that you really want to ask. Again, I saw some of you flag things like, oh, you're curious to learn about federal funds or local participation and economic impact, et cetera. But if you have any of those comments or curiosities that kind of elevate to the formal question stage, please go ahead and use that Q&A feature. So, okay, I want to open it up by asking each of our panelists to just identify one common misconception about cooperative purchasing that you hear often and how you address it. So, Stephanie, I think we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. I think Tyler touched on it a little bit, is that by leveraging a national cooperative that you're eliminating the opportunity for a local supplier to participate in the process, or, if you're spending with them, that you're no longer going to be spending those dollars locally.
Cool. And I know we're going to double click into this because it's worth sharing experience on, and it does come up a lot. Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's knowing that not all the cooperatives are created equal, and not all of them have your best interest in mind when you're evaluating that. And our ability to look at that is to ensure everything we know up front. Some of the stuff that Tyler talked about, what's the administrative fees, is it competitively solicited? Who's benefiting if not the members that the cooperative serves? Those are all key components for us.
Awesome. And then over to you, John.
Yeah, I think my answer would kind of echo Aaron's in a way, in that, and to some degree at the city here, we've trained our end users to view cooperative contracts as a great option, as a great tool in our tool belt, so to speak, like I mentioned earlier. So one thing that we kind of get is our end users being really excited that they found a cooperative contract, or that the supplier says, oh, I have a cooperative contract. And it's kind of like, that's great. Now let's do our due diligence, right? Like, just because there's a cooperative contract or the supplier says they have a cooperative contract doesn't mean that we can use it just like that. So there's a process, and as part of being a trusted advisor, like, that's part of what we're here to do, is help them through that. Like, let's look and see how this was solicited, or what the documentation is, how many vendors were awarded, et cetera, and help them, get to the end state that they want to get to. But that's kind of the misconception, is like, just because there's one out there, we can just automatically use it.
Yeah, pros and cons, I think, of helping educate our end users and kind of peel back the curtain on the different purchasing pathways. I think, as you said, it can really build trust and help procurement be a strategic advisor. But there are some kind of risks or consequences to mitigate and consider as you're doing that too. Great, thank you all. So our next question for you is really around how you assess whether a cooperative contract actually fits your policies and priorities. So you've kind of all touched on, hey, it's great to have this as an option, but cooperative procurement isn't a silver bullet, and maybe even within cooperative contracts available, there may be different reasons to go with one option over another, and different processes that you each have to validate that you can actually use that contract and that it's kind of the best option for you. So Stephanie, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Kind of some of the things that John touched on, we have a process where we have a document or questionnaire, so to speak, that if our end using department is requesting to use the cooperative, that we're doing some sort of vetting process, that we're asking the questions like John indicated, does it have the cooperative language that is required by Virginia code that allows us to use it? Does it, meet the requirements for this specific purchase? Is it portable? Is the pricing set for, one entity, or is it portable to other entities? Those are just a few examples of some of the questions within that document, but it allows us to look at also, are there other cooperatives out there? As we've all mentioned, more and more are emerging. Are we doing our due diligence and not just selecting one particular cooperative? Are we, comparing all of the cooperatives that are out there and finding the one that is the best to fit the particular need that we have? It's not always about the lowest price. It may be about other service factors, intangibles, but we need to vet all of that up front and make sure we're selecting the appropriate cooperative for use. Virginia is a little unique. We have a lot of requirements that have to go into our contract documents. So we have created a process where we've created a boilerplate rider that we present to the cooperative supplier. And we start that as the baseline document where we can negotiate terms and conditions so that we're meeting all of the requirements that we have in Virginia.
Ooh, rider. Maybe some folks listening kind of scratched their head or said, oh, that's familiar. But I want to double click into that because it is something that that does come up a lot. Tyler, I know it's probably something you also have to navigate. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with what is a rider and where does it come into play with GovMovement and the organizations you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great point, Stephanie. Not every public agency has that specific process, right? But most public agencies that want to issue some sort of writing addendum or rider agreement, basically what that is taking a look at some sort of regional or national cooperative contract. The lead agency would have their own terms and conditions attached to the master agreement and award. And for example, Stephanie with Chesterfield County, they're going to look at that and go, our terms and conditions may be a little bit different. And that's what a rider agreement is. And from our standpoint, that's entirely acceptable, right? It's something between the public agency that's looking to utilize that contract and the supplier that's awarded the contract, depending on what they're asking, but it's a very normal process.
Yeah, thanks. Nomenclature can kind of get a little confusing here too. I know there was a question that popped into the chat around like, bid, RFP. Sometimes we use bid as a catch-all. I know rider can also have a couple different flavors as well. So some folks call it a rider. We've also seen entities refer to it as a participating agreement or a participating addendum where you're kind of layering your own terms and conditions on top. So those might be, depending on the region of the country that you're from, also synonymous with what we're talking about today. And then
Mari, I was just going to tag in right quick and just say that that's an excellent example, Stephanie, and we actually use that as well at the City of Virginia Beach, and it has had a really high success rate with us being able to close on these like cooperative contracts. So just wanted to shout out that is a best practice, at least in Virginia, that has been really successful in helping us get some of these cooperative contracts in place. So
awesome. Aaron, how about you? Can you share some of your experience here as well?
Yeah, so I think this is something that really seems to be changing quickly as the cooperative industry evolves, right? All the new players on the scene and the changing dynamics depending on leadership. I think, for us, as we evaluate this as cooperation in its true form, we look to other large institutions that may want to work together. So maybe not even a national cooperative at all. But as we look at the cooperative landscape, finding the best fit for us, not only compliance wise, pricing wise, but also finding someone like GovMovement is a good example, right? Where trust is a key component. I can trust that the leadership of GovMovement isn't gonna back channel, cost increases and things like that. They're not going to change administrative fees and all that for a public institution is unbelievably important. As legislators start to look, why would we use a work product that's done in another state or even not a higher education institution? So having the trust in the leadership that they're going to stand by what they say, their work product is probably, the biggest dynamic as cooperative marketplace changes.
Yeah. So thanks. I think what I heard everyone say is there is kind of a process that's maybe there are some steps that are shared across everyone's organizations of kind of how to vet and do your due diligence of what's the basic checklist, but there are very likely some additional components, whether that's adding a rider or navigating specific requirements that your own agency has that you probably need to take into consideration as you kind of identify the right contract for you. And then I think, Aaron, this component that you just mentioned as, hey, there's this other component potentially to consider around trust. What are the things that actually stand out or differentiate in the cooperative ecosystem with if everything kind of checks the boxes, are there additional factors that you kind of go through that really help certain options stand out over others? Okay, I want to turn to another challenge that comes up a lot in our experience with serving public entities across the country on cooperative procurement, which is, and I think, John, you already touched on it a bit, so we'll start with you here, which is really around How do you help kind of socialize and build internal support for using cooperative contracts and balance the opportunity to kind of introduce this tool in the toolkit more broadly to your users with some of the like risks as well that come along with doing that, of having to kind of be on our toes around preventing kind of compliance mishaps or misunderstandings with your users as well. So I know you have some experience here using cooperative contracts, helping to kind of build that trust and relationship with your internal customers. Can you share a bit more about that?
Sure. So, I mean, like I alluded to it before, I mean, we've tried to become more strategic. We're meeting regularly with a lot of our departments and kind of getting an idea of like what's coming up. And when we do that, it helps us be able to kind of lay out options ahead of time, right? And so again, when you're presenting a cooperative contract as one option, not the option, I think it helps to build that trust. And the benefits of cooperative procurement kind of speak for themselves. So some of the things that Mari and Tyler have alluded to, as far as like the 87.1 hours and the 4 to 24 months that it takes, to do a solicitation. I mean, you don't have to really sell that to your end users very much, when you talk about that as a benefit to maybe using a cooperative contract. But it helps to sort of establish trust when, you're sort of laying it out there as just one option among many. And maybe, it's the option that we really want them to take, but, being sort of impartial in it, I think is helpful sometimes. So that's kind of what we've tried to do, is try to be strategic, present it as one option among many, and guide them where we can towards the right option. We've also, like we've done requests for information before and said, okay, let's gather the information. Let's find out what cooperative contracts, what vendors, what they propose. And that's been helpful as well, and helps us reassure sometimes our end users that, again, we're not just looking to use a cooperative contract necessarily, but when we get the options back and that is the strongest option or most advantageous option, then, that's definitely a direction to move in. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, we are also seeing a pavilion, some organizations really seeking to educate their end users more, and even have their end user departments go out there and identify options so that it can be a bit more of a conversation. I think you have some experience there as well. Can you share your experience? What's that been like?
Yeah, so actually we utilize Pavilion we have it in a flow chart for our departmental users where, if they're looking to procure something, is it established on a city contract already? And if it's not, then, one of the steps in that flow chart is like, hey, go use Pavilion and see if there is a cooperative contract out there that we might be able to utilize. And so we work that into the process so that we sort of get them in that mode of thinking of that as an option. So that when they bring it to us, they've already done at least some of the legwork ahead of time. So that's been helpful.
No, and it's great. I think we've built some additional features so that procurement teams can sort of impose additional compliance requirements, so that end user departments are not going kind of way out of their compliance guardrails. I know someone in the chat, I think coming from New York, was asking about that, where it's like, oh no, like we can't just use any contract. We have to now use single award contracts. So being able to kind of build that trust with your end users, socialize them to, hey, this is an option, even let them do some of their own discovery, but also set the guardrails, I think has been really cool to see some procurement teams kind of take that approach. Okay, I want to move on to one of the trickier and most frequent kind of question areas that comes up, challenge areas that come up around cooperative procurement, which is really around the seeming tension, I think, Stephanie, that you highlighted in the beginning of accessing the benefits of cooperative contracts, time savings, administrative cost savings, while still supporting your local or diverse or small business goals. So can you share some of your experience here and how you're navigating, the seeming tension as well?
Absolutely. As local government, we have a lot of emphasis. We actually have an initiative that is focused on increasing our local spend. So that's a big priority for us. So how do you leverage the use of national cooperatives with your initiative to spend as much of your dollars locally as possible? I think what people misunderstand is that you have a national award, but there's no opportunity for that local vendor to participate in that process. And we're seeing more and more that a national company is awarded, but they are using a local distributor or a local installer to actually perform the work. So we're meeting the requirements to spend locally. We're not eliminating that vendor that potentially had a contract with us before because we are utilizing them just in a different way. We're able to sometimes see that there is maybe not the complete framework. It's not established that we have local dealers, but there's language in there that would allow us to engage with a supplier and initiate that conversation. Would you be open to adding in? It has language that allows you to have a subcontractor. Can we use a local subcontractor? So we're trying to engage with and use that national cooperative framework, but maximize our potential for our local spend.
Yeah, I know that, and that's great experience. Thanks for sharing. I know when we were getting together on the prep call for this this webinar, this was a question that I think everyone had some experience with wrangling. So John, I want to pass it over to you to share some of your experience.
Sure. And absolutely, as Stephanie said, one of the biggest things here at the city, we've had a disparity study. And so we have goals that we are really striving to meet when it comes to especially doing business with small women and minority owned businesses. And as Stephanie said, one of the kind of cornerstones of our approach to that is using cooperative contracts for like MRO supplies, office supplies, furniture. And these companies, they have local distributors that are small women or minority owned, where we've been able to sort of get millions of dollars of spend through those local, or small women minority owned businesses. So that's been a key part of our strategy. And I even think back to my time when I was in South Carolina, for example, where we were, this might resonate with some people, but we were standardized to John Deere tractors. Well, we weren't buying John Deere tractors from the plant. We were using a cooperative contract and we were actually buying them from the local distributor, of the John Deere tractors. So, there are ways to use cooperative contracts and still engage in those business segments that you either have to be or want to be engaged in.
Awesome. Okay, Aaron, over to you, because I know you have some experience here to share too.
Yeah, so I mean, Illinois offers its own set of strict guidance when it comes to this, but I think our small and local businesses will always play a major point in our socioeconomic and our environmental goals. Not that a cooperative can't, but for us, it looks to create some partnerships, right? So we're oftentimes trying to meld our local Illinois-based businesses with our large cooperative partners. It's kind of the best of both worlds, but it can certainly become fragmented when we look at spend like that. But really, the partnership model for us helps, as we can only really accept Illinois certified vendors for diversity. So we really have to work hard to create the best of both worlds. It's not always the case, but we certainly don't expect the national cooperative to be specific to Illinois when it comes to that goal setting.
Awesome. So I think what I'm hearing is there is no one size fits all model here, and that it kind of depends also on your entity's goals, and also the options that are available to you. So I think sometimes, as John flagged, there might be distributors or other local businesses that you can work through, and it's not necessarily immediately obvious that that's kind of a path. So it's worth kind of double clicking into. I think what Aaron mentioned, I've also heard from some of our community members at Pavilion around working with national co-op partners on how do we sort of get some of our local businesses even under that umbrella contract? Is there a way to kind of make sure that they're included? And that can be a huge advantage for those local vendors as well. And then one of the things that I've been kind of excited about and observing just here at Pavilion is the opportunity too, when your entity is creating a contract, even if it's not intended for a national audience, to basically include that shareable or piggyback language so that others in your region can use it. And that can be a huge benefit. So it's a bit of a different way of thinking about this, but not only how do we drive our own agency spend through purchases on other contracts, but how do we use our contracting process as a way to help our local vendors who are awarded contracts by our entity grow their business within our region. So we have seen that as a trend as well, of increasingly as local agencies are adding this co-op language or piggyback language to their solicitations and bids, that the resulting awarded contract can be really beneficial for those local and diverse and minority-owned businesses who may not, again, be able to serve nationwide, but certainly are interested in more business in a region and are kind of educated then by the entity about being able to use that contract to grow. Okay, well, I think this is actually a great place to double click and open it up into questions before we kind of ask for parting thoughts from each of the panelists. And I see that there are a lot of conversation or questions that have come in through Q&A. And I know some have also come in through chat. So just a reminder to folks that are joining us as participants, if you would like us to answer that question, please do submit via the Q&A feature, and we'll kind of use that to triage. So it looks like there's a question from Pierre here who wants to know a bit about the process of this tension between using a local supplier that might have a higher price versus, say, like a big box or national company that might have much more competitive or lower pricing for a similar product. But how do you kind of navigate that tension of, do we go local? Do we pay more for local versus do we leverage the cost savings of maybe working with a much larger business? So I'm sure you each have experience to share there. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in terms of navigating that probably pretty frequent tension. Stephanie, I see you coming off mute.
I saw John on mute too, so I didn't want to jump in over him. I would just say it really depends on your organization and your organizational goals. Some people have set asides and requirements that you are going to want to accept that higher price because you're driving that spend where your initiative is. For us, we don't have set asides. It's an aspiration. We are looking where it makes sense, but there are times that it's not going to make sense to pay more, and we're going to look at that specific situation. We're going to look at what it is we're buying, where we bought it before, and if that specific situation warrants us paying more to leverage that local spend versus just using that national cooperative that's going to have better pricing.
Yeah, I was going to say much of the same, but I think a couple of things. I think your organizations that have these types of programs, understand, at least they should understand, that there's a cost to these programs, right? And so being willing to pay a little bit of a higher cost to achieve your social, goals, I think is reasonable. But at the same time, I think, as kind of stewards of taxpayer dollars, again, as Stephanie said, it depends on your organization, but, come on, like the price needs to be fair and reasonable, too. So we had one example come up where, we had gotten a quote for like $19,000 for some items from a small business, that we really wanted to use, but we could get them for $6,000 somewhere else. We're not gonna pay that much more for the same stuff, right? So it just kind of depends on your organization and like Stephanie said, where your priorities are.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder to be explicit about that tension when you are facing it as well. I know always in procurement, we face a bunch of different goals. And so understanding those trade-offs and being able to articulate them clearly. I know my own experience at the City and County of San Francisco, we had a lot of social legislation, and that often led to us spending a lot more, paying a lot higher in terms of costs in order to achieve that social legislation. And actually recently, some of that social legislation was changed, in part because there was a more detailed assessment that went back and looked at the total cost of some of those policies. So I think sometimes there can also be that tension of, we have these aspirations, but we haven't actually understood the impact in terms of cost. So being able to represent some of those trade-offs in a very clear way, I found can be helpful with some of our electeds and our executive leadership within our organizations. I know there has been a request. I know Jennifer flagged around templates for rider agreements and procurement checklists. And I think I saw that there were some folks in chat sort of offering opportunities like I think Julie, yeah, flagged maybe there's some resources on NIGP. If anyone would be willing to share, we're happy to make those available as a follow-up to this conversation as well. So you know, we'll kind of pull the panelists, and if they're willing to share, we're happy to attach links to those or those as attachments as a follow-up to this conversation. I think the other question that's come up in terms of challenges for navigating cooperative contracts, looks like there are a few that are category specific. So I saw one that popped up around job order contracting, and I know this can also be something that changes a bunch depending on where you are. Like, are you able to use cooperative agreements for construction projects or not? And in what cases do you sort of decide to do that? I'm not sure if anyone on the panel wants to jump in there and kind of just share their experience around construction. I know John, from sort of following your career for a while, you definitely have some experience here, but others might as well.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just going to say she put you on the spot, John. In Virginia, we're not allowed to leverage cooperative procurement for construction. So I would say kind of a blanket statement, know your state laws, know any local requirements that you have as well. You know, it's not going to be a one size fits all. This is not going to be appropriate for every purchase you make. It's one tool, and if it's appropriate for your state to use that for construction, then you can consider it. But if it's not, then you need to know that you need to steer away from that. Set that expectation for your end users as well, so they're not out there finding something thinking they can use it, and then at the end of the process you're telling them, no, we have to go compete this and it's going to take you another 90 days to get through this process.
Yeah, and don't get me started
sorry,
on
go ahead,
the
John.
Virginia statutes around cooperative contracting and construction. But yeah, as Stephanie said, knowing your state laws, and then also, you know, getting with your legal team, because even the definition of what constitutes construction for your agency might be different than maybe your neighbor, that you say, well, they're using the contracts that's available, this cooperative contract for this, and you know, my lawyer says no, you know, we better steer clear of that. So always just good to, as we say all the time, you know, make sure your legal team is aware of it and that they're signed off on it before you, if you think there's a question like that.
Yeah, one of the things, again, in this new product experience that we're working on is kind of building some of those compliance requirements into what we display in terms of the available paths. So we've seen some entities like, you know, in Virginia, hey, if you have a construction project, we shouldn't even be socializing or showing end users cooperative procurement options for that category, because by statute, you know, they're not actually able to use them. So that can be tricky of like, oh, you know, hey, I know cooperative contracts can help me purchase faster, but actually, nope, not in these cases. So how do we kind of guide users towards that behavior and balance, again, the huge benefits of having some of these tools available to us with the very tough to kind of in a log line socialized nuance about our own rules and regulations. Okay, I want to shift gears and look at this pricing question. And I know some folks added their own experience in the chat around the question of, hey, when there's a really big price difference between a local vendor and a you know, a national vendor on co-op contract, for instance, how do we sort of navigate that? And some folks have you know, by statute, I think, you know, limits of you know, about those price differences. One of the other things that when it comes to pricing that can come up is navigating sort of how pricing is structured on cooperative contracts. So there was a question that someone flagged around what, if any, kind of support is available, or how do you navigate the percentage off of catalog or percentage off list to determine the right price when you're using a cooperative contract, and also to defend that that pricing, you know, in your approval processes or review or audits, because sometimes there can be this challenge of, hey, you know, there's a catalog, it says a discount off list, but how do I actually see what that list pricing should be and know I'm getting the right or the best price? So anyone have experience to share here?
Well, I would maybe ask Tyler to weigh in and see, what has been your experience? My experience, if I ask for pricing from a vendor, before contracting with them, they're going to give it to me, and if I ask for a price book, so I can look at what the percent off list and see what the list is before I enter into that contract. I mean, they're going to give it to me before I.
Yeah.
But Tyler, do you have any experience seeing that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that first and foremost is all about transparency, John. People ask me, why do I need to register for the program, specifically just coming from my perspective? Well, one, they get access to the contracts, but two, they get access to the pricing, and the pricing is available to them. That, public agencies don't have to go to the salespeople and ask for it, right? They get it. Um, in general, most national contracts are built with ceiling pricing, right? Leveraging some sort of national economies of scale. A lot of these national contracts, John, are over $100 million annually, right? So when manufacturers or suppliers look at responding to these solicitations, they should take that amount of volume opportunity in mind, which drives additional pricing value to you. Now, the good news about tying this back into the local side is that cooperatives, when you're looking at a local impact level, can accomplish both things. You get your economies of scale leveraging great pricing, but then the local distribution partners, whether it's a dealer or whoever, can access that contract pricing and extend it to you, right? So if you have a large project, we see this a lot with furniture and other things, the ceiling pricing comes into effect, where maybe that supplier has the ability to come down off that price and be more competitive, right? So all of those things are built into these programs.
And then one other hot button issue that I wanted to touch on, and it came up in the very beginning too, is around use of cooperative agreements and federal or grant funding. So I know there are some entities that kind of get, like it's kind of too tricky. So they, as a rule, sort of say, hey, we're not even going to look at co-op agreements. I've seen others that are actually like, yeah, we can totally use those as long as we do sort of diligence on these couple of extra tasks. So it adds additional work to kind of go through and make sure that that the requirements are covered. But wondering if you all have an experience there in terms of navigating use of federal or grant funding when it comes to also leveraging cooperative or piggyback contracts.
I think anytime you're dealing with a federal grant, the first thing you have to do is look at the specific grant requirements. Each of them have unique requirements included in that grant package. We have trained our end users to start there to see what restrictions there are. It may not be appropriate for all types of federal funding sources to use at FEMA for one. They don't like any pre-established contracts. So FEMA, anything that's related to FEMA might be hard to use a cooperative procurement, but there are other instances where maybe a pass through to your local Department of Education that has less stringent requirements for the use of those funds that might be appropriate for a cooperative contract.
Anyone else have wisdom or advice to share?
I would just echo that from Stephanie. I think it's largely dependent on what's what's at stake, what's the grant side of things, and it's difficult to answer because it's so case by case. But I agree with Stephanie's input.
Yeah, and it looks like some other folks responding with their experience around use of FEMA funds, for instance, in cooperative contracts. And I've seen some great presentations at like FAPO and other events as well on this around, certain rules of thumb with using certain grant programs that can apply to cooperative contracts, but just imply a couple more due diligence steps as well. Okay, I want to give some time for the panelists to kind of leave us with some parting thoughts and wisdom. We've covered a lot of different ground today. As predicted, I know there are probably way more questions than we'll be able to answer here and challenges, but appreciate you all coming together to share some of this experience and hopefully help each other out. So I think with that, wanna go ahead and ask each of our panelists to just share out one piece of advice you'd like to give to a peer, probably someone in this, in the audience who wants to make better use of cooperative contracts. So maybe we'll go ahead and start with you, Aaron. We'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, I think the best advice is whether you're a longtime procurement professional or somebody new, it's just know who you're dealing with, right? As you talk about cooperatives, you're vendor marketplace is going to be, you know, covered by 5 or 6 different ones at this point, right? Know who you're dealing with. Do they have your best interest at heart? Are they helping you navigate things that you otherwise couldn't do yourself? And just make sure that your cooperative partner has the best interest of your institution, and just like you do. And then just be careful, right? It's a changing dynamic. There's a lot of money to be made, and that's evident in the marketplace as it continues to evolve and grow.
Okay, over to you, John.
I think for me, the advice I give is to make sure you're networking with your peers in your locality, in your region, your public procurement peers, because you know, I'd say a significant portion of the cooperative contracts we use are through the national co-op. So we also have quite a few that we use through that are, you know, the city next door that has a contract for it, that has cooperative language in it. And then ironically enough, the power of that is like someone from Stephanie's team reached out to me last week and was like, hey, who do you use for this service? And I was like, well, we're using a Sourcewell contract. And I linked it, you know. So again, just that networking is invaluable, and kind of being able to ask others what they're doing around you.
Awesome. Stephanie?
I think we've said it before, there's no one size fits all. You know, we've shared kind of our experiences and what works for us. I think you have to look at your individual agency, your individual state, and you have to figure out what works best for you. I think John used the word strategic. It's really helpful to have some sort of plan on how you are going to implement the use of cooperative procurement, and that set those parameters and those expectations for your end users up front, instead of trying to figure it out as you go along.
Awesome. Okay, and then Tyler.
Yeah, just briefly, this has been fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you to all the public agencies that put your trust in us every single day. We can't do it without you, right? And so we are here as a resource for you. If there's anything that you need, myself, David, the entire team are here to help you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us here, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your questions. I know there were more questions than we had time to answer, and I'm really grateful to those of you in the on the panel and also in the audience as participants who are chiming in to answer each other's questions. I think it just goes back and reinforces that, like, find a friend, ask a peer, you know, take advantage of the tremendously generous community that's out there when it comes to sharing wisdom and expertise. And again, we just so appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to share that wisdom and expertise. You know, Tyler, Aaron, John, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. And thank you all for joining the conversation, and excited to keep it going. We'll see you next time.